Michael with United Veterans Worldwide for an exciting interview today with Kenneth Delaney. And he and I found each other on LinkedIn. He's got some great content, including an incredible podcast that I encourage you all to check out and to learn from. But I'll turn some time over to Kenneth now and have him introduce himself and tell us what he's about.
All right. Hey, how you doing, Mike? I really appreciate you having me on the show. Appreciate you reaching out. As you know, I've tried a podcast, a YouTube type of deal, and I'm 50 years old, so I'm still learning about all this, and I'm still new at the whole thing. But I'll tell you a little bit about my background if you want.
Please.
All right. So at 17 years old, I know you're United Veterans Worldwide. I was in the Navy from 1991 to 1995. I didn't do anything special. It was peacetime. I was a welder. The rate was called home maintenance technician. So the nickname for that was basically turd chaser. So we were plumbers in the Navy, and you were in the Navy, so you know.
I do.
So I did that. My senior year in high school, the first Gulf War started. So I was like, I'm going to join the Navy. I'm not going to go to college, so let me join the Navy. That lasted all of about 2 weeks. So I had already delayed entry sign. I was going in anyway. Did my 4 years in the Navy, 1991 and 1995. I got out of the service. In 1996, I joined the United States Park Police. And that is a police department. It is the oldest uniformed federal law enforcement agency. And it was originally called the Park Watchman, started by George Washington back in 1791. And they are under the Department of Interior, National Park Service. So I did that. And I worked in Washington, D.C. a little bit, and I worked most of my time in the New York field office. But there's also a field office in San Francisco. Those are the three main areas for the United States Park Police. They have aviation, patrolmen, horse-mounted marine unit, helicopter unit, it's a fully functioning police department. The name sounds a little weird because it says Park Police, but we have full state authority, full city authority, full federal authority on federal property. So I did that for 6 years, and after 9/11, I got onto they opened up the Federal Air Marshal Service.
Yeah.
So I got on the Federal Air Marshals for about year and 3 months or so. Did that, but the whole time I was waiting for the fire department in the city of New York. So I finally achieved my dream in 2003, 2 years after 9/11, get on the fire department, and I did 18 and a half years active in the New York City Fire Department. Was able to buy my military time back and retired with a total of 21 and a half years. And I've been retired for 2.5 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's an amazing career. I had no idea. For one, I didn't know anything about a U.S. Park Police. So if I reference the movie Elf, have you seen the movie Elf?
Yes, I have seen Elf.
Okay, so there's some police who chase him through the Central Park. Is that them?
No, that is city park rangers.
Okay.
Now the difference between they have federal park rangers, like National Park Service has park rangers, and they have park police. The park police are basically like the urban street cops of the National Park Service. The park rangers will be in like Yosemite. They'll be in the big national parks, they do a lot of interpretive stuff. They do a lot of guides and stuff like that. The park police wear a different color uniform. We wore blue stripe down the pants. All police, and we basically patrolled all urban parks within the District of Washington D.C., New York City, and San Francisco. And to go from one federal park to the other is all city property, all state property. So we had authority that if we could pull people over, we could make arrests on city streets and stuff like that. But the park rangers and the park police in the National Park Service are
two different.
They're under the same banner, the Department of Interior, but they're two different agencies, really.
Oh, that's amazing. And I'm very familiar with air marshals. Those guys are some pretty tough beasts. I've got a buddy who's done it now for many years, and he loves it. He loves it.
Yeah.
It can also be a very dangerous role.
It can be. It can be. I did it for about a year and a half, and I was really excited to do it because I felt like after 9/11, I was waiting for the fire department, but I wanted to do my part. I wanted to help out. I had already done my military time. Wasn't going to go back in the military. I was waiting for the fire department, so I was like, if I get an air marshal service, I'll feel like I'm helping protect the country. I wanted to do my service, do my part, and getting on that job was really cool. I got trained by some really, like you said, some pretty heavy dudes, some really, really guys that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just a little street cop kid, you know, from Brooklyn, and these guys were legit, and I learned a lot from them. And if there are those guys still doing it, then God bless them, because it's a great job to be single. You know, you travel a lot. If you have a family, it's a lot more difficult because you're away from home a lot. But it was a great experience, and I wouldn't change it for the world. It was a huge part of my life. That year and 3 months changed me as a person for forever. So I needed that part in my life to happen.
No, that's wonderful. Yeah, and then waiting for an opportunity to jump on one of the most prestigious city fire departments in the country. You know, when you say New York Fire Department, it's everybody knows it. So again, that's just amazing to me. So if I were to sum up your career, your careers, it spans a life of service, is what it does. And there's something so honorable about doing that for your entire career. So thank you for what you've done for the country, from the federal side, from the state and the local. I'm sure that you've given a lot. So appreciate it, brother.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And on that, you've served a life of the same, serving the country and the military and all that stuff. And I really appreciate your service. So thank you so much for doing what you do. And now what you do by trying to help the veterans worldwide. Because I really like that there are veterans everywhere. There are wars going on everywhere right now.
Right.
And a lot of guys, not just our country, you know, I'm privy to our country, of course, and the men and women that have served our country, but you don't realize that the war's going on. Everybody, they're children fighting wars and the stuff that they go through. So I appreciate what you're doing too. Yeah,
thanks very much for that validation. I feel like this mission is really important, and I hope to have more global voices on here, especially when we talk going through trauma and coming to a place of triumph. We really are blessed in the United States to have resources to help us nowadays to do some of that. In other countries I've been in, there aren't those resources, and so people really struggle on their own. But let's talk for a minute about your career again. So if you were to take your entire firefighting career, and maybe you can even throw in your police time as well, what are the key highlights that made the most impact on you through your career?
So I have some good highlights, some great highlights, and then I have some pretty tough, mentally draining highlights.
Yeah.
The most significant one by far is when I was in the police academy. Now, the United States Park Police, their academy is in Glenn County, Georgia, at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. We called it FLETC. I don't know if you've ever heard of FLETC.
No.
So it's down in Georgia, and a multitude of federal agencies train there. Border Patrol, mostly the uniform services, like any of the agent jobs, FBI and Secret Service agent jobs, I think they train somewhere else. But most uniform federal agencies train down in Glenn County and FLETC. In the academy was 6-7 months long, living down there, dorm style. There were only 24 of us that started that class. The department, I think, had a maximum of at one time, about 700 guys spaced out. So the classes were very small. We started with 24. We ended with 22. One guy got hurt in the beginning, so he had to get rolled to the next class. But a few months into the academy, in October, I went in July. In October, you know, we're living together. We're building bonds. I'm building friendships that I still have, and guys that I still talk to.
Yeah.
Having a great time, young, learning, becoming a cop, feeling like I'm coming into myself, maturing, making really, really tight friends. So close to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center with St. Simon's Island, the Golden Islands, Jekyll Island. I don't know if you've ever heard of those.
Mm-mm.
They're on the East Coast. They're just like vacation spots, and they're very close to the base. So we would go down there on weekends, have dinner, have beers, you know, hang out, just have a great time. Everybody from the base went down there. It was just a fun time. We always we'd go down and we always had a designated driver. We always made sure, we always were like, all right, who's not drinking tonight? You know, all right, it will be me. I'll take the reins. I'll drive this way. Everybody gets home safe. Nobody gets jammed up. So one night we were going out, and I had partied the night before. It was a Saturday night, I believe. And the night we were going out, I was chosen to drive. I was like, all right, I'll drive, no problem. I'll get everybody out down here and party, get home safe. My buddy, who owned one of the cars, was like, you know what, Kenny, I'm going to drive tonight. I was like, dude, you drove last night, you know, I'll drive, don't worry about it. So we had a little bit of a back and forth. And he was like, dude, just don't worry about it, I'll drive. And I was like, I never missed an opportunity to have a couple of beers. I was like, all right, you know, you're going to drive. Right. I'll go out and have a good time, for sure. So we're going out, I'm sitting shotgun, he's driving, we got two buddies in the back, and there's a carload of us behind us, so we're piggybacking to the island. On the way down, they were just bullshitting. I'm sorry that I cursed, but
go for it.
It flies every now and again.
Yep.
So on the way down it, the causeway, which I believe was 2 lanes eastbound and 2 lanes westbound, or it could be north and south, but it was 2 lanes one way, 2 lanes the other, separated by a double yellow line. In the distance, I see 2 sets of headlights oncoming traffic, right? And they're zipping in and out of traffic, in and out of traffic. And, you know, I didn't think anything of it because they're over there, we're over here. So we're still driving. I said to my buddy, I go, you know, your car's pretty filthy. We got to clean this car tomorrow. And he's like, yeah, you know what? You're right. And then as he said that, headlights got into our lane and we hit that car head on. They tried swerving back into their lane and we cut the car in half. We flipped over and skidded about 275 feet. We cut them in half. The kid in the back seat of their car, from point of impact, landed 300 feet away. My buddy, we flipped over. My buddy had hit the post of the vehicle. Their car hit us, and he was not killed instantly, but he died. They kept him alive to get his family down there to say goodbye and all that stuff. So it was a very, very difficult thing for me to deal with. He was, at the time, he was probably the guy that I was closest to. I felt extreme guilt because I was supposed to drive that night. So now I have survivor's guilt. So now I'm thinking it should have been me. He was getting married. He was a couple of years older than me. He had a family. Like, it was just horrible, horrible, horrible thing. I won't go into detail of how bad it was. The kid in the other car was dead. Turns out they were teenagers and they were drinking and driving. And we were just going out. It was still early. We haven't done anything yet.
Yeah.
But that accident flipped my brain and my mind. And I've never been in combat, but to me, I still attribute to maybe, I don't know, like a roadside bomb or something. It felt like an explosion. Next thing you know, we were on the hood of the car. There was glass everywhere. There were car parts everywhere. They had to pry open the doors to drag me and the guys in the back out. My buddy in the driver's seat was, I don't want to go into detail, but it was pretty bad. Helicopters, it was awful. But that incident was the most significant incident, and I just started my career. You know, I was young, I was 22 years old, and losing a friend in that fashion.
Yeah.
You know, to just start your career and then have to move on from that. It took me years. Like, today's what, October 7th?
Yep.
Yesterday was actually the 28th anniversary of his death.
Oh my
3 days
goodness.
before that was the 28th anniversary of the accident. So that was the most significant, worst thing. Yeah. One of the worst things. Probably the worst thing in my career, and it just started my civilian first responder career, you know?
Yeah, and when you talk survivor's guilt, that's a pretty common theme that a lot of my audience, my global audience, can relate to. You know, when 9/11 happened, I was called in right away, and they said, hey, they need an extra corpsman, a doc to go with the Marines, and they're going to meet up and start launching and going into country. And I said, okay. I packed all my gear. I had 2 bags packed, and I ran into a guy in the hall at the hospital, and he's like, hey, I outrank you. I haven't deployed yet. I'm going in your place, and you're going to have to wait till the next ride. And I was angry because I was young. I was ready to go fight. I was ready to go do. And he went, and he was killed by a sniper 2 months later in country. And he had a wife and 2 kids. I was single at the time. I can relate to this. And I was like, that should have been me. Like, I should have fought harder. I should have handled this guy a little bit, but obviously that's stuff that we just can't control, right? And most of survivor's guilt, to the common person hearing it, would automatically say the logic, which is, there's no way you could have known. It's not your fault, right. But there is something that happens mentally that flips, and it's like, there's something that hangs on for a long time, even if it's not deserving.
Right. No, I definitely, we can relate on that. And, I should have fought harder. I went over that in my head for so many years. I should have fought harder. Maybe if I didn't argue with him, we would have missed that accident by 10 seconds. It would have been behind us.
Yeah.
You go over all these things in your head.
Yeah.
But I try to say, it was hard to say it after that for a while. What's meant to be is meant to be. Like, I feel like we're exactly where we're supposed to be right now.
Yep.
And if none of that happened, and all the other stuff, I wouldn't be here with my beautiful wife and my kids and my house and all that stuff. So, but it's still, it doesn't make it any better because of what, you were there. And
yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that experience, because I think, again, like, people can relate to that. I could personally as well. So I felt that. Tell me another experience that you felt was another highlight in your career, for good or for bad. You decide.
Well, good experiences were, getting on the fire department. Actually, getting on the 6 years I was on the park police were very, very, very tough for me. Just still living that moment. Dealt with some tragic stuff that I never thought I'd have to deal with, but I did. But that was in the line of duty type stuff and didn't happen to anybody that I knew personally. But I just kind of felt like I was floating, like I just didn't belong in the space that I was occupying. Getting on the air marshal service, I had met a girl in the park police, broke up, and I was completely heartbroken. So my mental state was already bad, and that made it worse. But getting on the air marshal service and getting away and having all that time to myself, because when you're in air marshals, without giving too much away, you have a lot of time, a lot of downtime. Whether you're on a plane, in wherever you are,
yep.
If you know some of the guys, you got a lot of downtime.
Yep.
Sometimes you link up with your team, but if you don't, you're just on your own. A lot of time to think, a lot of time to mull things over. That year and 3 months or so, I built up such more confidence. I started coming out of my depression. Like, I never forgot. I still don't forget it. I still got to fight demons often.
Yep.
And I do things to fight that stuff. But that time in the air marshals, I just grew age-wise. I grew as a man, learned some things, got to experience a lot of this country and see a lot of cool things, and just built up my confidence. And I feel like if I didn't build up my confidence, my wife says, she goes, one of the reasons why I was so attracted to you, aside from my dashingly good looks, was my confidence.
Yeah.
And I was always like a very social person. I like to joke around. I like to be the life of the party. But she said, your confidence, when I met you, I met her right at the end of my air marshal service. And I attribute that to meeting her and her coming into my life. So that's definitely a plus in my service, my first responder service. As the air marshal service built up my confidence, for sure.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. One time I was on an airport bus getting from terminal to terminal, and I don't remember what city I was in, and I was joking with my wife next to me. I kind of whispered to her, and I said, hey, should I pretend to be an air marshal? And I kind of said it like that jokingly, and there was an older lady with a handbag sitting across from me, and she smiles, and she pulls out her badge, and I was like, what? She was. And I was like,
great.
You freaking never know.
You never know. And now, since I did it, I mean, it's been a while. I haven't been on that job in 20 some odd years. But for a while, I was flying. After when I got on the flight department, I would travel. I would try and pick them out. Like, oh, there's one, there's one, there's one. So it was a really great job. I'm really honored to be there to do it.
Yeah.
When I left that job, the special agent in charge of the office was a great dude, and he didn't want me to go. And I wrote them a really great letter, and thank you for letting me do this and helping out in the country and all that stuff. But it was a really great experience with the Air Marshals.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So then you get your dream come true. You've been waiting for this opportunity. You get into the fire department, and talk to me about your time in the fire department.
So everybody would say, "Oh, what made you want to be a fireman?" So when I was a kid, I lived in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn, in Parksville, Brooklyn, on 8th Avenue, and between Windsor and Prospect. I know that means nothing to you, but
except I was just there.
Right, you were actually in Brooklyn and you ran through the tunnels. That's great. I forgot about that. Awesome. How'd you like that?
I loved it. It was an emotional run, and I didn't expect it to be. But I saw so many wounded warriors. I saw so many injured fire department and police department, amputees, which just kind of messed with me a little bit. But at the end, it was the firefighters at the end who were cheering us on and holding the images of the guys who died in 9/11, and I couldn't help but get choked up on that. That was powerful.
Yeah, it really is a great experience. I did it a couple times when I first started having it. It's gotten really big. I think there's more people that do that now than the New York City Marathon.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's a big deal. But actually where you started isn't too far from where I grew up.
Okay.
On the Brooklyn side. So when I was a kid, back in the 70s and 80s, they called those years for the fire department the war years. There were a lot of arsons, New York City was just burning to the ground, especially in the low-income areas.
Yeah.
South Bronx, Harlem, East New York, those were where most of the fires were, but all of New York City had its fair share of fires. Down the street from me one day, so it wasn't uncommon to hear, sirens all the time and this and that. So down the street from me, there was a fire. And the sirens are going, and I can smell the smoke, and I'm only a kid. I'm probably, 8 or 9 years old. So I look out the window, I look down the street, and I see the fire out the window. 3-story, factory type building, and there's just fire blowing out the top floor of this window. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. The whole neighborhood runs down to the action. Firemen show up, and the professionals that they were, throwing up ladders, stretching hose lines in, and it looked to us, the civilians, as chaos. It was nuts. But they all know their job, they all knew their job, specifically what to do, they did it, and just watching them do all that stuff, and watching them put the fire out. I was terrified and exhilarated all at the same time, and that's when I knew, I said, this is what I'm doing, this is what I want to do. So the whole neighborhood was either cops, firemen, sanitation, they all worked for the city of New York. So it was a middle-class neighborhood, very tight, everybody knew everybody, and everybody worked for the city, and you did one of those jobs, and that incident, that fire is what made me want to be a fireman. So I get on the fire department. I took the fire department test in 1999. And it takes 4, 5, 6 years to get on the job sometimes. If you don't have a really high list number, you don't get on the job. Sometimes never. So people wait their whole lives and sometimes don't even get on that job. 9/11 happens. I took the 99 test. I did fairly well on the test, so I knew I was going to get hired sooner or later, so that gave me comfort. 9/11 happens, and, obviously 343 firemen are killed. Countless others are hurt. The job is devastated. They need guys, so they set up the hiring process, and I got hired, which, I would have got hired anyway, but maybe not right after 9/11, but I was getting hired anyway. Get on the job, and it's just my dream comes true. I'm just walking on air, loving everything. Get assigned to a company in Brooklyn, and it was a slow company, so it was great guys, great house, but it was a little too slow for me. So I have a lot of energy. I needed to work. I wanted to feel like a fireman, and when you're working a place and you're not really going to fires, you don't really feel like a fireman. I could think of maybe like a Marine or a guy that wants to go fight for his country and then doesn't see combat or whatever.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I do know.
Yeah. So I transferred to a company in Harlem, which is, I go from one of the slowest companies in the city to one of the busiest companies in the city. And now it's on, and now it's tough, and now the job starts. And it was a great experience, and we can go into some stories, we can go into whatever you want, but that's kind of the trajectory of how I got in the fire department.
Yeah, I love that. When we talk about getting a call to serve, I have my own story about being called to serve in the military and in the Navy first. And then when I was going to go out and go to law school, I watched a movie that impacted my life, Hotel Rwanda, about the genocide in Rwanda. And I was like, how could I get out? I've got to join the Army and I've got to go give it. And eventually ended up in Rwanda at some point. So, to the audience who's listening today, when you get the call, when you get that inclination, never forget it and do it, because it's what you're called to do. And that call to serve is the most noble of professions. The lives that you'll bless and protect and save are going to be incredible. So
yeah, like it was your purpose. It was your sense of purpose, right? Everything that I've done, military or Navy, Park Police, Air Marshal, Fire Department, I always had that purpose.
Yeah.
That purpose of helping people, doing the right thing, just helping the city out, whatever I could do. And then in retirement, I was ready to retire. I was burned out. I was ready to go. It was my time. I wanted to concentrate more on my family and being there for them. Then I kind of, after a while, after the newness of retirement wears off, you kind of lose, as a man, you kind of lose your sense of purpose. You're like, all right, what do I do now? I caught up on all the chores in the house. I do this. My wife's still working. My son's still going to school. I feel like I have nothing.
yeah.
I got really depressed.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have that sense of purpose anymore. So it's a double-edged sword.
So is that why you started the Kitchen Table 59?
It absolutely is. When you're at the kitchen table in the firehouse, you're around 11, 12, 13, sometimes 15 guys, and you're just building bonds, having a blast with the brothers. The stuff that you talk about, everybody's talking about the same thing, and you could be making fun of one guy, and then as easily as that, it switches to another guy, and you talk about fires that you're at, you talk about family life, everybody knows each other. Like, it was just like a huge therapy session without sitting in with a therapist, and without me even knowing it, I'm talking to them because they understood where I was coming from, and I understood what they were going through. We could relate to each other. We felt the same about things, and without being like that. Oh well, I was like this and I was like that. We just understood each other.
Yeah.
And I'd go home and I'd feel like, oh, I got all that stuff off my chest. And then when I retired, I didn't have those guys anymore. Like you text the guy, you call the guy, you might go out. It's not the same.
Right.
Every 3-4 days a week, most of the day, the heartbeat of the firehouse is the kitchen table. Like everybody congregates there. Like, oh, where is so-and-so? Oh, he's in the kitchen. Oh, he's in the kitchen. Oh, I'm going to relieve so-and-so. Oh, they're in the kitchen. Everybody was in the kitchen. And when you don't have that anymore, you're just like, what do I do now? You feel like you lost everything. I felt like I needed to talk. I just needed to talk. So I started. We always joked that we would start a podcast, but it would be more on the comedic side.
Sure.
So because we're a bunch of ball breakers. But I never realized how much I needed to talk until I started talking. So I decided to just start this and open myself up to whoever would listen, to let guys know that the stigma of having mental health issues isn't a weakness. I think not getting help or not talking about it, even if you're talking to people that you can relate to, you get that off your chest, you become stronger. A person who lets that stuff out, you can now focus on your job, your family. You become a better person, a stronger person. You're not a weak person because you have depression or anxiety or fear or something like that, So I just felt like I needed to talk, and whoever would listen, so be it. They'll listen, and maybe just to let them know that they're not alone, and somebody else is going through this, and maybe they felt the same way.
Yeah, I love the fact that you have your own tribe in the firehouse where you can talk about everything, and you guys are together and unified in that way, and that's an incredible thing. And it's a lot like guys deployed who rely on each other constantly through all the mess. We talk about a lot of things while we're over there, and it really does bond us for life. It's an incredible experience like that. Give me a couple more examples of highlights in your career as a firefighter. Tell me a couple more stories here. I'd love my audience to get another glimpse. I think if I went back in time and I was exposed more to a firefighter's life, there's a good chance I would have gone into the firefighting. So
it's funny that you say that, because the military and fire department are very closely related. Like, we feel like out of all the civil servant jobs and all, the military, like, we are with the bonds, with the brotherhood. Obviously different, you guys go to combat, you go to fires, it's different apples and oranges there, but the bonds, the brotherhood, are very, very closely related between firemen and military. And a lot of military guys become firemen.
Yeah.
So and because they're probably still seeking that when they get out of the military, they're seeking that bond, that brotherhood.
Yep.
And when you get on that brotherhood, you're going to have that for the rest of your life. So
right.
Right about that. Let's see. At the first, I'll tell you a decent fire story. Like, maybe I'll just talk about my first fire, and then I'll tell you a little something that happened that was very, very tough for me early on in my career as well.
Yeah.
So my first fire, I was in Brooklyn, and I was working for the company that wasn't as busy. It was 220 engine, great guys, great house, great company, just not busy enough for me. And we would get detailed when another company in the area would need a guy. If you were extra, you'd get detailed to that company. So now I get sent to another company in Brooklyn called 247 Engine. Now, there's engines and trucks in the fire department. The engines tap the water, they carry the water, they put the fire out. The trucks are the guys with the ladders and the tools, and they vent, enter, and search. They open up the buildings, search for victims. So same job, but we do two different things. I get sent to an engine, 247 engine, and I'm a probie, so I only have, the academy was 3 months. I had about 3 months on the job. I only had about 6 months on the job. So my first fire, go to this company, it's in the middle of the afternoon. I don't know any of the guys on the rig. They don't know me. I'm brand new. They see that I'm a probie. Now they got to worry about me because they know I don't have any experience.
Right.
Go to this fire. Fire comes in while we're on the rig. And now, for me, it's panic. These guys are calm. They're doing their thing, and I have no idea. I'm throwing my pants on, I'm throwing my helmet. Like, I'm just like, oh, here we go. Go in, fire out the windows. We go in. It wasn't as big a fire as I thought it was. Went in, put a couple rooms of fire out, and it was over. It was over like that. I attribute it to, and this is going to be funny, I attribute it to, like, the first time you have sex, right? You don't know what you're doing. You don't know if you're doing it right. It's over in about 30 seconds. Now you're soaking wet, and you keep asking the guys, did I do okay? Was
yeah,
yeah. So that's kind of how the first fire was.
Yeah.
But when I got back to my company, they all knew it. They all knew that, because everybody in the city knows when you go to fire. So you got the apps. It goes over the loudspeakers. So they knew I was at that company when that happened. I got back there, and I don't know if you ever saw Goodfellas, the movie Goodfellas.
Yeah.
Remember when Henry gets arrested for the first time, and he comes out of court, and they're all standing on the staircase, and they're like, "Oh, you broke your cherry."
Yeah.
That's what it was like when I got back to my firehouse. They hugging me, high-fiving, "Yeah, you did. You broke your cherry. It was great." I felt almost like Rudy, like they were going to put me on.
Yeah.
And it made me go, this is what I've been searching. This is it. These guys, I love these guys. These guys love me. This is the brotherhood. And it felt so good to have that. Like, you go to a fire, and you don't want to see anybody hurt or anybody's property destroyed. But if something happens, you want to be at that fire, right? You want to do your job. But when there's a fire, even a small fire, it destroys people's lives.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah.
So for us to go back and high five each other and stuff like that, it's like, it's cool, but it's like, I did a good thing, but that person's house is destroyed now. But I got back there, and the guys were like, "Oh man, great job, it was great." And then you tell them about it, and everybody sits around and we talk about it and stuff. And that was a huge highlight of my career. My first fire, and all the guys greeting me when I got back to the fire.
Those moments have to happen, though. From someone that's not involved in that arena. The first firefight, the first time you get mortared, we do something very similar. you've got to have that so that you have the right mentality the next time you go back into that fire again. And of course, I know first responders, firefighters, police, who are the most empathetic people to the situation that they're dealing with. And you know, one of the hardest things, brother, that I always contemplate is when I would deploy to harm's way, I didn't go home at night. I stayed in harm's way for a long, long time. And then I would come home and there'd be this whole interaction. But you guys had to go home after all that.
Yeah.
And how do you turn that off and switch that button, that fight or flight? Because you have to have that fight or flight when you're a firefighter. And it's not a flight, it's a fight. You know, you're fighting it, right? So it's not unlike what we go through. And sometimes that fight or flight gets broken for you guys too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if it doesn't turn off, then you're constantly on edge at home, the same way you would be on a fire.
Yeah, definitely. You do all these things, and the fire department, yes, we go to fires, but there's so many other things that we deal with.
Yep.
Car accidents, medical runs, CPR, shootings, stabbings, it's soup to nuts. We deal with it, and the fires are the fun part of the job.
Yeah.
Unless somebody gets legitimately really hurt or, God forbid, dies. But the fires are the fun part. The tough parts are, the kids you got to deal with, and the death, and the 8 million people in the city, and they all, you show up to their house, it's the worst day of their life, pretty much.
Yep.
And you're going there to try to help them, and you're dealing with people that are having a real tough time at that moment. One of the very tough things that I had to deal with early on in my career, I transferred out of that company. I got up to 59 engine in Harlem, and Harlem is a very, very busy area. A lot of fires, a lot of people packed into a small area, and we did a lot of runs. One of the runs that I had to deal with, you're dealing with a lot of stuff, a lot of medical stuff. I'm doing a lot of CPR, and you're learning all that stuff, but it's mostly on adults, right? Most of the time I had to deal with adults. You deal with some shootings and stabbings, and that stuff is crazy and wild. As a corpsman, you probably know, having to plug up holes and blood and all that stuff. But when you're dealing with adults, it's not as, I don't want to say it's as easy or that bad, because it is. But when you have to deal with a child, it's horrendous.
Whole new area, yeah.
Yeah, we got a call one day. We're pretty busy. EMS company, we did a lot of medical runs. It's called the engine. I was in the engine, 59 engine. And one day we get a run for infant not breathing. And anytime you get a call for a child or an infant, guys are like the Flash. We're out the door in seconds. Anytime a child is involved, you're out the door. Not that we don't leave quick anyway, but with a child, we're balls to the wall.
Yep.
Going the wrong way on the streets, going against traffic, getting there as quickly, shortest way we possibly can. So the house was about 4 or 5 blocks away. The chauffeur's the engine, the guy that drives the engine, turns the corner going up the wrong way, and there's already a cop car on the street. I jump out of the rig, and a cop hands me a lifeless 6-week-old baby, not breathing, and that was the first time I had to deal with that, and I didn't know. Not that I didn't know what to do, I was just like, holy shit. So I immediately started breaths and compression, and now we're going the wrong way. So the cop car, one of the guys goes, jump in the cop car. So we jump in a cop car, and the hospital is only about 2 or 3 blocks away. So now I got a cop driving, I'm in the passenger seat doing CPR on a 6-week-old baby. And we get the baby to the hospital, hand the baby off to the emergency personnel. Baby wound up dying, but that was so traumatic to me, holding a lifeless 6-week-old baby and trying CPR. And it all happened so quick. That's the thing about fire department and fires and stuff like that. They happen so quick that you don't have time to think.
Yep.
You just have to do your training. You train so much, you have to get that training in. And holding that baby and getting into the hospital, I didn't know once I handed it off, my guys weren't there yet. They had to go all the way around. So I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to talk to or what to do. I'm crying. I didn't know. And I had just had my son. A couple months before.
Oh, brutal.
Now I'm thinking about my son and my family.
Yeah.
It was really rough. And then we talk about the brotherhood and stuff like that, but we got back to the firehouse. Nobody knew what to say to me. Nobody knew, like, they understood because some of the guys have probably been in that kind of situation, but nobody knew what to say. Nobody was like, you want to talk? You okay? And I don't blame anybody. They just didn't know what to say to me. I wouldn't even know what to say to them. The doctor, the boss had to have the doctor call me because I gave mouth to mouth. Like, we usually use bag valve masks and stuff, but I went mouth skin to skin. This was all I could do.
Yep.
So I had to have that form filled out, and then I went home. And, I didn't tell my wife. So I get a phone call the next day from a buddy of mine, and he's like, Kenny, and he wasn't working that day. He was like, bro, you all right? I was like, yeah, man, I'm good. I appreciated the phone call, and when I hung up, I broke down.
Yeah.
My wife was like, what the hell happened? What's the matter? And I told her, and it was really tough for me. That still, it doesn't stick with me as much as it did.
Yeah.
But that was very, very tough for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it was you, though. I'm glad it was you that was doing that. You didn't hesitate. You gave that baby every opportunity for life. And I know you don't always get to see the ending story of the family back there or whatever, but yeah, brother, I love the fact that you did that, and you gave it everything, and you gave it more. You gave it your emotions, you gave it your heart, you gave it the empathy, and I think that's what makes what you do so heroic in so many ways. You bear that burden.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Sometimes, like, I think about some of the things that, and these podcasts are about mental health and stuff like that, and I think about some of the things that I've been through, and then I go, what have I been through? Look at the guys that have been in combat, have lost limbs, who've had to deal with that for years and years and years. Like, look at what's going on in North Carolina. They're losing their homes and all that. And I go, I don't want to compare my trauma to anybody else's, but I almost feel like what I went through wasn't so bad. Look what they're going through right now. So,
yeah, but we can't do that. Yeah, because there's always someone who's gone through something worse, right? I interviewed a girl, I think she's in her late 20s. Her name is Ash. I did an interview with her. She had gone through some severe child abuse when she was younger. I'm talking stuff that her parents should have been imprisoned. And seeing her journey from trauma to triumph, and I just kind of said, who am I to complain? Like, what have I gone through? I at least had good parents, right? Like, but we can't play that game because there's always someone who's done more or whatever. I'm talking to a lady in Canada right now, and I hope to get her on an interview here soon. But she was the person who picked up the phone when 911 was called. What do you call them? The dispatchers, right?
Dispatch. Yeah, dispatch.
So she did dispatching for a long time and came away burdened with some post-traumatic from the calls. And the worst thing that I saw on her channel was somebody posted something like, how dare you try to steal the limelight from the first responders? You just took the call. And I was like, whoa, time out. Like, if you're on the call and somebody's screaming that they're being murdered or something else crazy, like, you cannot tell me that's not going to mess with your head.
1,000%.
And I'm so glad you feel that same way, because I told her, I was like, I want to validate you on my channel. Come on and tell your story, and I will tell you 100 times over that what you feel is real and is valid, because, yeah.
Talk to the 9/11 dispatchers. There's a great documentary that they made after 9/11 about the dispatchers that had to deal with all the phone calls from people that were above where the planes hit. Before the towers collapsed, and trying to talk them, comfort them. The dispatchers do not get enough credit, especially in very, very busy places when they have to deal with such a large call volume. But again, when people call 911, it's like I said, they call you on one of their worst days, if not their worst day of their life.
Yeah.
And you have to get information out of them, and you have to find out where they are, and you have to find out what's going on, and be calm and be comforted. It's very difficult. I don't know if I would be able to do that, you know?
Especially when it's a 12-hour shift, 5 days a week. Like, come on. Like, it just never stops.
Yeah. Like, I remember a funny dispatch story. There was, not funny, but there was a very bad fire. And there were multiple calls and people trapped. And, you know, a fire department dispatcher has got to handle a lot of things. And you got different companies coming in. There's a lot to organize. And they must have been training this one dispatcher, right? Because she was, poor girl was screwing up a few things. And right in the middle of like one of the sentences, you could hear her get ripped out of the seat. And the senior dispatcher sat in. Only because she was new and it was just so hectic. And I couldn't imagine being on that end and having to deal with it. I get the messages, I go do my job.
Yeah.
You know, having to relay all that information, it's a tough job, and they do not get enough credit. And my hat's off to dispatchers for sure.
Yeah, I love that you say that. And she's going to love that too, because I'm going to share that with her and be like, you need to watch this. And here, Kenneth, tell you this example right here, because that's true.
For sure.
Well, as we get close to the end of this interview, this has been a great conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. My hat off to you, my brother, for what you've done in your great career. I hope more of our participants in this and viewing this today decide to take a career of service and see the benefits and rewards. And you know, someone recently asked me, would you, with the trauma that I went through in combat, would you go back and not do it? And I said, oh, heck no, of course I would do it. Because with this small thing came all of this, and I would never trade my time away from having to deal with some hard things on my own, right?
Yeah, that's what we do.
That is what we do.
The people who dedicate their lives to service, that's what we do, and that's part of the job.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade any of it, because like I said before, everything that I've done, regrets and all, mistakes and all, have put me right where I am right now.
Amen.
And I'm happy with my wife and my family right now.
Yeah, brother.
So, yeah, man.
All right, so last minute here, I want to ask you some advice. What would you tell a listener today who's struggling with their own trauma?
You're not alone. You're not alone. You're gonna have demons. I have demons that are there all the time. I have a process that I do every day. Trust your process. Get up early, discipline, daily habits, positive self-talk, eat right, train, don't drink too much. You are not alone. You will fight. You'll get through it. Just trust the process. And right now, believe it or not, this last couple weeks, I'm having to trust my process. You know, I'm having to fight through the demons. And they're there. So trust your process. Get into a good process. Get into a good habit. You're not alone. That's one thing. You're certainly not alone.
Perfect. I love that.
Yeah, man.
And feel free to reach out at any time, brother. We're connected now. And you're not alone in your demons. I fight mine too. I post about it frequently if I'm not having a good week. And I trust my process too. I get up, do my workouts, I eat well. I connect with people and family, and connecting with you as part of that healing journey too. So thanks very much. And I encourage all of our listeners today to tune into his podcast, to learn from him and the other people that he meets with. Subscribe to his channel, support him, and like and subscribe here as well, and share, and especially reach out to someone who's in need today and do good. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks.